How's everybody doing today? Thanks for coming to class. I like how you folks are getting good at the timing. There were 0 people on the broadcast until 8:58, and then people started appearing. I like that. You're all getting the timing down. How's everybody doing today? Coming to you from my home office here in Willow Springs, North Carolina. Yeehaw. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. I hope everybody's doing well today. If you're on the broadcast, go ahead and check in live in the chat bar and say good morning. I just sent out an emailed announcement. I don't know if you've got it yet. It's also an announcement on Blackboard. I have a dentist appointment, just a regular checkup on Friday morning that I forgot about. It starts at 9:30. And so the exam review for this weekend is going to be at 8:30 instead of at 9 a.m. this week. I hope that's not inconvenient. Hi, Martine. Hi, Anya. What's up, Marcella and Andro? Oh no, Andro's AC broke. Dude, it is going to be hot for you today. You need to get that AC fixed. It always breaks down in the hottest part of the year, right? Hope everybody's doing well today. Did you get the video that I sent around? The Who Done It? The Who Done It video. How good are your powers of observation? Did any of you folks spot the changes in the video? I'd be curious to see if you spotted the changes in the video that you watched this morning. It was a short video. You're sitting there paying attention. You know that you're supposed to see that there are going to be some changes in the video. But were you able to follow along and see what changed in the video? I'd be curious. So for those of you who are just logging in, we're talking about the Who Done It video that I sent around this morning at 8 o'clock. Are there any notes for the exam? Anya asks a great question. The notes for the exam are the PowerPoints that I've been sending you and the chapter outcomes. So in each week's folders, each chapter will have some chapter outcomes. Those chapter outcomes are the notes for the exam. So those are the things that I want you to know, along with the PowerPoint presentation. And on Friday morning, when we do the exam review, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to open the exam, and I'm going to go through it question by question, saying, you need to know this, you need to know this, you need to know this. So I'm going to try to be as specific as possible for you, Anya. So either come to the review live, or if you can't make it, go ahead and watch the recording. But I'm going to try to give you some pretty specific information to help you be successful on the exam. So Jim Bro saw the knight change to a bear, the flowers, the lady's pot, and the suit change. Wow. Okay, so you folks saw some of the changes. How many of you didn't see a single change? I know when I watched the video, I've watched it a couple of times, and for some reason, I can never see anything change. And I'm not exactly sure why my powers of observation are so bad. Why do you think people have difficulty seeing the changes in this video? Hi, Lewis. Good to see you. We're talking about the Who Done It video. And I'm asking the question, why do you think it's so hard to notice those changes from moment to moment, right? You saw the knight, and then it swings away, and it comes back, and it's a bear. Some of you noticed it. I think Jim Bro noticed it, and Martine noticed it. But why is it so hard to see all the different changes that occur in that video? Any ideas? I'd be curious. Hold on. I have something I wanted to... I've got one more you might want to see. Hold on. Actually, don't worry about it. I will show it to you later. I will show it to you. Let's see. Gosh, dog it. How about this? I'm going to send you a video around real quick, and I want to see. Oh, no, I'm not going to send that one. There we go. I'm going to send you a second one around real quick, and I want to see if you can do this one. Okay? Dadgummit. Hold on. There we go. All right. Here's another one. Let's see if you can do this one. Ah, some of you did notice it. I think it was because I mentally made a note about those things. I just sent another video in the chat bar. Go ahead and click on this one and see if your powers of observation are good in this second video as well. It only takes about 30 to 45 seconds. It's a real short video, and tell me what you think. Jim Bro, but the pot was small, and I was like, wait a second. Okay, so it just took you a minute to sort of catch up for it. It's because you mentally made a note about those things. Ah, you were paying attention. Okay, you knew to expect some changes. Okay, that's cool. Well, I've sent that second video around. I want to see if you can spot the changes that occur in this video. You're aware of it, so you're probably not going to get fooled right now. I see we have everybody jumped off real quick to watch that video. If you're not watching that video, it's, there you go, okay, fantastic. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and open this up because we're going to be talking about consciousness today. And what you're doing when you're paying attention to things is you're trying to see if they break into your conscious awareness. Some things do, but you'd be surprised how many things do not get into your conscious awareness. Why is my color? There you go. I expected changes and more. I noticed things that interested me. When it was different, I hesitated and wondered if I actually saw a change. So even when you thought you saw a change, you weren't exactly sure, Jim Bro. That's a good point too. Sometimes you're not even sure if you noticed a change or not. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of seeing something and then you do a double take and say, did I really notice that? It's kind of weird how our consciousness works that way. What we're talking about is conscious awareness. Your ability to pay attention to the things that are occurring around you right now. And what I'm going to try to argue to you today is that your consciousness is limited. You only have so much, so many resources to pay attention to the things around you. And what I'm going to suggest is that you miss a lot more things than you think you do. Your ability to perceive awareness is not 100% perfect. Okay, so how many of you did not notice the moonwalking bear? I see that we have 7 people back. Lewis didn't notice the moonwalking bear. Did anybody else notice the moonwalking bear? Isn't it crazy? The bear walks right across the screen, and you know research has shown that people miss the moonwalking bear about 50% of the time. Andrew didn't notice it, Cielito didn't notice it, Lewis didn't notice it. Jim Bro, maybe you were paying attention. You might have noticed it. Isn't it weird how that bear just walked right across your eyes and you didn't even notice it? Can somebody tell? And Lewis said he didn't even get the number of passes right. That's funny. Why didn't you see the black moonwalking bear? Why? If you didn't see it, why do you think you missed it? And more importantly, how often do you think that happens? How many times do you miss something that is completely obvious? Isn't that crazy? Today we're going to talk about consciousness, what it means to be conscious. We're going to talk about a model of consciousness. We're going to talk about what split brains can tell us about consciousness. And then, I wish my color would get right. My screen is not working. Hold on just a second. I'm going to increase the lighting in my studio to see. There we go. Now we don't have that shady look. Okay. Fantastic. That's why I have so much respect for detectives. That's a great point, Jim Bro. How can you walk in and you notice all these little details and nobody tells you that this cigarette butt is important or that piece of chewing gum is important or the fact that the door is open or the door is closed? Detectives seem to have a special power of observation, right? Martine said they were actually paying attention to the number of passes, right? You're focused on one thing and you miss another. So we're going to talk about what all that means today in chapter 1 of consciousness. So we're going to spend today talking generally about consciousness, and then on tomorrow we're going to talk about a very specific type of consciousness that we all experience once a day, which is sleep. And I'm going to talk about some of the research that, some of the insights that we've gained on with sleep research. There we go. Let me get in the middle of my camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. What is consciousness? Because what I was doing today was testing your conscious awareness, your ability to pay attention from moment to moment to moment to the things that are occurring around you, the things that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you smell, and the things that you feel. You know, you're wearing a shirt right now and it's probably rubbing up against your skin, but you don't notice that. Your house, if you cooked something for dinner last night, I'll bet you that odor is still in your house right now, but you don't smell it. I'll bet you that there are things and sounds that are occurring. Right now, if I stop, I can hear somebody mowing their lawn about 2 houses away from mine. But as a general rule, I might not hear that if I'm paying attention to this lecture and talking to you folks, right? Now, probably one of the oldest questions in psychology is, what does it mean to be conscious? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the allegory of the cave. It's a story, it's a Platonic parable that sort of talks about the limited nature of consciousness and people's unwillingness to give up their level of consciousness. Have any of you ever heard of the allegory of the cave? I highly suggest you check it out. Now, here's the thing. Consciousness is really, really difficult to explain. It's even harder to measure, really. And so consciousness, so Jimbo might have heard of it. We read it for English 111. Okay, Lewis, go back and read it now, but think of it as a parable for people's ability to perceive consciousness, and think about the moonwalking bear and how you completely miss the moonwalking bear, and then look at Plato's allegory of the cave. And you're going to say, holy cow, maybe Plato was correct. Okay, really cool story that has a great insight on consciousness. Consciousness is really, really difficult to explain because it's such a slippery thing. It changes from moment to moment. It involves hearing, seeing, smelling. And so there's really no universal agreement on what consciousness is. However, if we wanted to come up with a general description, I would say it's your moment-to-moment awareness of yourself and the environment. So it's what you're thinking about right now. No, what you're thinking about right now. No, what you're thinking about right now. You see what I mean? It's your moment-to-moment awareness of what you're thinking, what's going on inside, and what's going on outside. Now, it includes, but may not be limited to, your subjective history. So I'm thinking about where I learned this all from. I'm thinking about the Plato's allegory of cave. I'm thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing today, what's going to happen tonight, why I'm giving you this lecture. So it's your subjective history. It's also your sensory experiences, what you're seeing, what you're tasting, what you're hearing, what you're smelling, and what you're touching. It's also your thoughts about your memories and experience. So even as I'm giving this lecture right now, I have an internal dialogue going on in my mind saying, Chris, are you saying everything right? Did that come out right? What do you need to say next? How well is this lecture going? I'm sitting here evaluating my experience even as I'm having it. So it's your introspection. And then it's also your ability to decide what you are going to do next. So some of you are watching this lecture and you're not tuning off. Some of you are going to get bored right now and watch another YouTube video about Dr. Pimple Popper, or maybe another Better Call Saul short episode. So it's what's going on in your moment, from your mind, from moment to moment. ADHD makes that so much more intense once you pay attention to your own thoughts. Absolutely. You know, and people with ADHD maybe have trouble controlling their attention. You know, if you think about it, our attention bounces around from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And that's actually a very adaptive behavior. Because if you think about it, if the squirrel gets too focused on eating the acorn that it's got, the fox or the bird is going to sneak up and kill it. It's very important that your attention bounces around from moment to moment, because it's important to keep aware of the things that are occurring in your environment. But people with ADHD can't seem to stop their attention and bring it to one thing for long enough to be productive in an academic setting. Sounds like we've got a couple of people who've experienced the ADHD. Right, absolutely. And ADHD is okay until somebody asks you to focus on something for a bit of time. And then you find it's hard to really control that consciousness. So, what are some of the questions that people have about consciousness? The first one is subjectivity versus objectivity. Is there a universal form of consciousness? Do we all experience things the same way? Does a cup of coffee taste the same to me as it does to Martine? Does the color red look the same to Cielito as it does to Andrew? Or does each and every one of us have a different kind of subjective experience? We might ask the question, are dogs conscious? Are fish conscious? What are the minimum necessary qualities for you to be considered consciousness? You know, there are some people who even think that trees and rocks and the universe have a certain sort of consciousness. But that really depends on, yeah, yeah, funny comment. Jimbo saying, yeah, right. I need to work on this. Ooh, a disguised toast. Absolutely. How many of you have ever just got on the internet and tried to do something, and then suddenly you saw a video in the suggestions and you clicked on that video, and 2 hours later you realize that you've watched 52 YouTube videos and not done your homework? Absolutely. Yep, Jim Bro, that's great. So what are the minimum qualities? And then here's the hardest question. Where does consciousness come from? Here's the deal. Do you all feel like you are aware of your body? If you think you are controlling your body, I would ask you the question, what do you mean by you? Is you a soul? You know what I mean? Is you something that controls your body? Or is you actually your body? Okay? So here's the question. Where does it actually come from? Does consciousness come from something that pays attention to your body? And if so, what is that? Is it a soul? Is it magic? Is it some sort of physical, chemical property? What exactly is it that is conscious of us? I would say that your neurons are conscious of your neurons, right? Your brain, good point, but what part of your brain? Are you aware of your brain, or is consciousness coming from the physical particles, right? Some people would say that there is no such thing as a soul, because a soul is something that doesn't exist. It doesn't have three-dimensional properties. How can a thing called a soul move your body around, right? Now, here's the crazy thing. It turns out, I know I'm a little team of me's who in hard hats controlling levers and switches in my head to pilot a meat mech. Exactly, Jim Bro. And the Scottish philosopher Gilbert Ryle made that kind of comment about the idea of a soul. He called that the ghost in the machine. If you say you have a soul or some sort of person or some sort of controlling mechanism that controls your body, then you're basically talking about a ghost that controls a machine. Now, there's actually a little graph underneath me that shows when you measure people's brain activity and you tell them to engage in an act and you say, tell me when you first think about moving your arm. And what happens is their brain actually activates before the person is even aware, decides to engage in the behavior. So if I tell you that I'm going to move my arm, what happens is my brain activates even before I make the decision to move my arm. So the question is, do we have a soul, or is it the neurons that actually create the illusion of a soul in our body, right? Now, there are ways of comparing consciousness. We're going to talk a little bit about conscious behaviors versus unconscious behaviors. There are a lot of things that are going on in your mind, maybe events that happened to you as a young child that affect how you act today that you are not aware of. So we're going to talk about those unconscious forces that drive you as a human being. And then today specifically, what we're going to talk about are different states of consciousness, self-induced, naturally occurring, or injury related. How many of you have ever meditated? How many of you have ever been hypnotized? You know, I was hypnotized in the 8th grade by a psychologist. And after I woke up from being hypnotized, I decided that's what I want to be when I grow up, a psychologist. I was at a science camp at Appalachian State University in 1982, it was. And I had this long haired hippie psychology teacher for a 2-week psych class, and he hypnotized us. And when I woke up, I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. So we're going to talk about that today. Now, let's give you a quick model of what we think consciousness is. You might say that consciousness originates primarily from the activity of the cerebral cortex. That's that part of the body, the brain that we were talking about yesterday when I was talking about the motor cortex, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal, and the occipital lobe. I got hypnotized into wanting to study psychology. Exactly. You will become a psychology teacher. And the rest is history, Gustavo, right? So, consciousness, in the global workspace model, what they suggest is that consciousness is not here, it's not here, it's not here. Really, you can think of consciousness by whatever happens to be activating in your brain. So, if my occipital lobe is firing up, my consciousness is primarily visual. If my temporal lobe is activating, then my consciousness is primarily my memories. If my olfactory cortex is activated, then my consciousness is primarily odoriferous, right? And so the global workspace model says consciousness is a fluid process that goes on in many different parts of the brain. And your conscious experience, what your consciousness is composed of, depends upon what part of your brain is active at any given point. Look at this picture over here on the other side. You'll notice in the bottom screen we have a picture of a house. You notice right above that in green we have a picture of a face. And then right above that we have a picture that includes the house and the face superimposed on each other. So in this particular study by Tong et al. In 1998, what they did was they used the fMRI technology that tells you what part of your brain is active at any moment. And they showed people a picture of a house. And they saw what part of their brain was active when they were looking at the house. They then showed people the picture of the face, and they asked them what part, they measured what part of their brain was active when they looked at the face. They then showed people the superimposed picture. And when you look at the picture, I don't know, what do you see when you see the superimposed picture? Are you seeing the face or are you seeing the house? What you're going to find is that some people see the face and some people see the house. Not everybody sees the same thing. Some of you saw the face, some of you saw the house. And what Tong et al. Found is depending on what people said they saw in the superimposed picture depended upon what part of their brain that was active. So for example, when Lewis is looking at the superimposed picture, he would say, oh, I clearly see the face. And while he was saying that, the part of his brain that had earlier been mapped to the face was being active. On the other hand, Jimbro was saying, oh, I saw the house instead of the face. And so what you would notice is the part of his brain that was active when he saw the house initially was active. And so this is sort of the demonstration of this idea of the global workspace model, that really what your consciousness is, even though we can't describe what it is and it's so complex, it appears to be related to whatever happens to be going on in your brain. And so if you meditate, if you're hypnotized, if you take some sort of a drug, right, whatever it is you do, and it activates that part of your brain, that will create your consciousness. So for example, some people take LSD, a psychedelic, and when they're under that psychedelic, they see pools of colors floating about them, shapes of colors. And what you're going to see is the part of their brain that sees colors is going to be activated at that given point. If any of you folks find this idea of consciousness interesting, I highly suggest that you watch the TED Talk video that I have in your course resources folder. It's called How Your Brain Hallucinates Your Consciousness. I swear to goodness, it is the coolest, most mind-warping TED Talk you will ever see. Your brain hallucinates your consciousness. The gentleman in the talk does a couple of really neat demonstrations to show you how crazy our conscious hallucination really is. So even though you and I are conscious right now, basically we are hallucinating the same reality. And when people have psychological disorders, basically they're hallucinating an incorrect reality. But his thesis is that everybody is hallucinating reality at any given time. Crazy, crazy talk. All right. Now, one of the cool demonstrations of this idea of brain activity demonstrating consciousness can be shown in split brain patients. All right. Now, here's the deal. Like I said yesterday, the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. If you draw a line down the middle of your visual field, the right side of your brain sees the left side of your world, and the left side of your brain sees the right side of your world. Now, the reason you don't know this is because the corpus callosum connects the left and right half of your brain, so that all you see is a unified field. But I promise you that the left side of your world is being perceived by your right brain, and your right brain is perceiving the left side of your world. Okay, I promise you this has happened. And the only reason you don't know is because of the corpus callosum, which allows these two halves to communicate. Now, it turns out that there have been experimental surgeries of people's corpus callosum. The surgery is called the Commiserotomy. And when they first started doing this, what they would do is they would cut the corpus callosum completely in half. Brain surgery, kind of dangerous, only done in severe situations. Now, it turns out that some people have epilepsy, and they have epileptic fits that are really, really bad and that don't respond to medicine. And in those cases, what they do is they split the corpus callosum. Now, today, they don't split the whole corpus callosum. It turns out that you can split part of the corpus callosum and it will decrease the severity of the epilepsies. But in the old days, they would completely sever that corpus callosum, separating the left half of the brain from the right half of the brain. Now, what a fellow named Robert Gazzaniga did, actually, I don't think he was an author in your book. I don't think he's an author on your book now. It might be Grayson and Gazzaniga. Robert Gazzaniga is one of the first persons to do the split brain procedure. And they found that people do crazy, crazy things when you split their brain in half. So if you look at this picture right below me, you'll notice that this fellow is looking at a screen, and if you see in the middle of that screen, there's a dot. If you get a person to focus on that dot, focus their attention, their eyes on that dot, and you show them pictures to the left and right side of that dot, what you're going to find is that the chicken leg on the right goes to the left hemisphere, and the house on the left goes to the right hemisphere. Now, you then start asking this person questions, and you're going to find out something crazy. Good point. Your ability to talk is on the left side of your hemisphere. And your ability to move things and your mobility is more on your right side of your brain. So if you ask this person right here, if you ask this person, do you see the house? What they're going to tell you is, I don't see a house. They're going to say, no, I do not see the house. Okay. However, if you ask them to point to a picture of what they see on the right side of their screen, they could point to a picture of the house. Okay. So what's happening is their right side of their brain can see the house, but it can't talk about it. So if you ask the person to talk about it, they're going to tell you that they don't see anything. And that's because the image is trapped in one side of their brain and can't make it into conscious awareness on the other side of the brain. So, as I suggested, and you can read the little parts, go to your book and read all about it. And they did several different demonstrations showing how your conscious awareness and the things that you see can get trapped in either the nonverbal part of your brain and you can't talk about it, so it doesn't exist, or it can get caught in the left hand of your brain and you can talk about it and it exists for you, right? Now, a crazy illness that some people have occurs from strokes that occur in it's in the right parietal lobe. People with strokes in their right parietal lobe sometimes suffer from a disorder called hemi-neglect. That is, they don't pay attention to any in the left side of their field of vision. It's almost as if the world only exists to the right half. And if you ask this person to draw a picture of a house, they'll draw the house, but they'll draw the right side of the doors, they'll draw the right side of the windows, they'll draw the right side of the house, but they will leave the left half of this object off. If you ask them to draw a clock, they'll draw a clock, but they'll put all 12 numbers on the right side of the clock, and they won't put anything on the left side of the clock. It's almost as if this stroke damage has caused them to be completely unaware of half of their world. An even more bizarre finding is called blind sight. And this is a disorder related to the visual cortex in the occipital lobe. Now, here's the deal. Part of your brain is responsible for consciously seeing what you see. Holy cow, I see a computer in me. There's another part of your brain that sees the movement of objects. So when you're looking at an object, one part of your brain is recognizing that you see an object, and the other part of your brain is recording that that object is moving and where that object is located. People with blind sight, if you show them a picture of an object, they won't be able to see that object. But if you ask them to guess where the object they can't see is, they will point to it exactly where it is every time. If you ask them what object they are looking at, they will tell you, I can't see the object. But if you move the object and ask them to guess what direction the object is moving in, they will be able to guess the movement or the direction of the object's movement 100% of the time. So the crazy part is they don't actually see the object, but they can see the object moving. If you come to class tonight, I've got several consciousness-related videos that I'm going to show you that will demonstrate this divided nature of consciousness. It is super crazy and it is super cool. And again, what it demonstrates is your consciousness is A, limited, and B, it is determined by which part of your brain is active and which part of your brain you can actually access at a given time. You might be asking, Chris, blind sight, is there an opposite condition? Actually, there is an opposite condition where people can see objects, but they can't see their movement. And so objects appear to move around randomly. So they'll be looking at that coffee cup and it'll be here, and then all of a sudden it'll be over here. And they won't be able to see the movement of the object. They'll be able to see it, but they won't be able to see when it moves. And these people can't do things like pour water into a cup because they can't actually see the water moving into the cup. They can see the water, but they can't see the movement of the water. Very, very bizarre. Okay? What we did in the beginning of the class is I showed you the limits of your conscious awareness. Here's the deal. You only have so much attention to give in any given situation. We have very limited abilities to perceive and think about objects. So we have to be very, very cheap and very, very frugal with the things that we pay attention to. I like the concept of people as cognitive misers. We have very limited resources for conscious attention, and so therefore we only pay attention to those things that we think are very, very important. If you don't think something is important, then you are not going to pay attention to it. So, for example, I told you to watch the people passing the ball, watching the people in white passing the basketball. And you said to yourself, wow, I want to count the number of passes. So I'm really going to focus on that. And so you don't have a lot of attention. So you gave it all to the people dressed in white. And so you were completely blind to the bear floating across your screen. That's a demonstration of what we would call inattentional blindness. If asked to pay attention to a certain part of the environment, people often do not attend and are completely oblivious to other things that occur in their environment, right? On the other hand, when we watched the whodunit video, I was demonstrating what's known as change blindness. You're not really paying attention to something because you're focused on other things. And so when that object changes, you don't notice that it is actually changing. Look at this picture I've got over here, this Methods of Psychology Change Blindness Study. They do this really cool experiment. And actually, there are YouTube videos about this that are really hilarious that you should watch. They have this person, this guy with the papers in his hand in the far left image, is up talking to a stranger on the street, and he's asking him for directions. And then they have two other people walking from the experiment. You see in the video too, two people walk between these people, and they are holding a big, what looks like a big old piece of wood, a door, a window, a piece of plywood. And they walk in between these two people. But what they do is they do a quick change. They do a quick change while that piece of wood is moving between the person asking direction and the random person on the street. And you'll notice in the third screen, the person is now different. Instead of being the guy over in the first screen, it's now a different person. And the question is, will the person they are asking directions to, will that person notice that the person who's asking them question is changes? And you know what you're going to find out? 50% of the time, people do not recognize that the change has occurred. And here's the crazy thing. You can even change the gender of the person asking the question. And sometimes the person being asked the question will not notice that the person that's approached them has changed from a male to a female. It is so crazy how our brain can get focused on one thing and miss very obvious parts of our environment. This is because we have this limited ability to focus our attention. And so a lot of times we miss things that change in our environment. How many times do you people do things? Do you really think about lifting your coffee cup every time you take a drink? No, you don't. Have you ever dialed a phone without thinking about the phone number? How many of you have ever had this experience? Have you ever kind of been driving down the road and all of a sudden you start thinking about something else and you wake up 2 minutes later realizing that you've been driving down the road not paying attention to where you are going? And you're like, oh my God, I could have died. I was not looking at the road. You were thinking you were off in La La Land, thinking about your homework or a boyfriend or girlfriend and an argument you had. You've been driving a 3,000-pound vehicle at 70 miles an hour and you weren't paying attention to the road. Have you ever had that experience? I've had that experience and it's totally crazy. And yet, even though we're not paying attention, our body manages to keep us from wrecking that car. I do not suggest doing that, but it is an interesting demonstration of when it happens. Okay, now, meditation is a sort of a form of altered consciousness. Have any of you meditated before? You know, consciousness bounces all over the place. And what meditation is an altered state of consciousness where you learn how to stop your mind and focus it on one object for a few minutes. You're trying to learn how to control your attention. It's like yoking the mind. A yoke is when you put a collar on something. So it's controlling your attention and keeping it on one place for a given time. Now, if you've ever done meditation, what you're going to find is that it's really hard to keep focused on one thing. So you're supposed to focus at your nose, right? Close your eyes and sort of focus at your nose, or focus on a bell, the meditation leader will put a candle up there and you're supposed to look at the candle flame. And you'll notice that your mind wants to move away from that object. And the idea is keep bringing your mind back to that object. Keep bringing your attention back to that object. And what you do is you practice focusing your attention. Now, the regular practice of meditation actually is good for you. It turns out it decreases your blood pressure, the lower levels of arousal and anxiety that occur will lower your cholesterol and your glucose level, which are things that are elevated when you're stressed out. And as I suggested, it's going to decrease your stress level. It's going to decrease your negative emotions. And it's also going to improve your depressed feelings if you have them, right? Now, why does that work? Why does it affect your depression and your stress? Look at this picture right underneath me. Remember yesterday we said that we do use 100% of our brain, but not all of our brain is active at any given moment. It turns out that there is a set of brain areas in your brain that are active when we aren't doing anything in particular. So when you're focused, your attention is your front of your brain is active. If you're focused and looking something, the front of your brain and your occipital lobe are active. But if you've ever just sat around sort of daydreaming, not doing anything, these circuits in your brain take over called the default mode network, or sometimes it's called the task negative network. And these are areas of our brain that are active when we aren't doing anything particular. And the crazy thing is these parts of our brain tend to engage in certain types of activity. They tend to think about us. They tend to think about things that happen to us. And they tend to think about things that happen to us that are negative, right? And so what happens when you're not doing anything, this part of your brain takes over and it starts thinking about all the things that hurt your feelings or made you sad or depressed you, right? How many of you have ever sat around the house and when you start thinking, you just start getting angry about what people have done to you or bummed out about the things that are going on in your life? This is because the default mode network is being activated. The cool thing with focused meditation is it decreases the activities in this part of your brain. You tend not to do this when you're sitting around not doing things. The activity in your default mode network starts to decrease, which leads to more positive feelings and less depression and stress. Okay, meditation. I highly suggest you try it. I actually go up to New York to this hippie camp in the month of July. I'm going to be teaching my lectures from New York. And while I'm up there, I'm going to be meditating with a fellow named Subhag Singh. I go there every morning at 7 a.m. He wears a big turban and has this really long beard. And we sit with our legs crossed in his presence and meditate on a bell for 45 minutes. It's absolutely hilarious. Yes, it is, Marcella. Please try meditation. What you're going to find is that you're awful at it. It's very hard to control your attention. But as you get good at controlling your attention, what it's going to do is it's going to create more positivity in your life. Now, like I told you, I was hypnotized in 8th grade. Is being hypnotized real? Some people argue that it's an altered form of consciousness. And hypnosis can be described as a social interaction during which a person responding to suggestions experiences a temporary change in their memory abilities and their perception abilities. I remember when I was hypnotized, the hypnotizer made me put my hands together and then told me that there was a vice that was on the outside of my hands. And the hypnotizer said, try to pull your hands apart. And as much as I could not separate my hands because there was this imaginary vice holding them together. And I swear to you, for 30 minutes, I really thought that I was under someone else's control and I experienced things that I've never experienced before and my body was actually not under my control. To me, I thought it was completely real. And I really felt like I had joined a different state I had experienced a different state of consciousness. So for me, I would argue in what we call the dissociation theory. I thought that my conscious became separated from other parts of my consciousness, and that this gentleman had control of that limited part of my consciousness and was moving me around like a puppet. I really believe that my consciousness was dissociated from me for a half an hour. Now, there are some people that believe that hypnosis is bullcrap. And really, what they say is that people in general like to conform to what other people say. If you've ever been asked to do something, a lot of times we're polite or we don't say something rude in a situation because we don't want to embarrass anybody else. We want to fit in. And they argue that when you bring somebody up onto a stage and tell them that they're supposed to be hypnotized in front of a crowd of people, that they act like they're hypnotized because they want to fit in and do what is expected of them. This is the socio-cognitive theory. I highly suggest all of you attempt to get hypnotized at least one time in your life, and then tell me, is it real? Are you being dissociated from your consciousness? Or do you think you were just playing a role and playing along with the hypnotizing kind of person? Hard to say. Now, here's the deal. In terms of evidence about whether or not hypnosis is real or not real, exactly, Dale, exactly like the movie Get Out, Get Out. So what did the evidence say? Well, it turns out that you can actually treat pain successfully with hypnosis. Hypnosis has been shown to be effective in treating pain. In fact, the evidence shows that the brain areas that respond to pain reduce their activity when people are being hypnotized. So hypnosis can actually be effective in treating people's symptoms of pain. On the other hand, some people go get hypnotized thinking that they can be hypnotized to quit smoking cigarettes or to stop overeating, and they lose weight. And it typically turns out that after the hypnotic session ends, the effects of hypnosis go away. So I can hypnotize you and say, you do not want to smoke cigarettes. And while you're under hypnosis, you'll say, I do not want to smoke cigarettes. But as soon as the hypnosis ends, you're going to go back to wanting to smoke. It's I'm not sure. And the crazy thing is, if you folks all go out and try to get hypnotized, what you're going to find is that not all of you can be hypnotized. If you've ever watched a professional hypnotist, what you'll notice is that they bring 10 people up on the stage, and then they'll start excusing people as they go into their hypnotic scenario. And what the hypnotist can do is they can identify the people who aren't going to work well, and they invite them off the stage. So they'll bring 10 people. They're left with 5 at the end. Those are the people who they can tell are going to be hypnotizable. It's really cool. You should definitely go check out a hypnotist show. Now, one last thing I want to mention. I'm running out of time. How many of you have ever been in the zone before, or ever been doing something you like so much that you forget that time has passed? Maybe you're painting, or maybe you're writing, or maybe you're reading. I remember when I was a kid, my friend Tim Jackson and I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, and we would get together Friday afternoons after school at 3 p.m., and we would play Dungeons and Dragons for like 20 or 25 hours straight. We wouldn't sleep. We wouldn't think about anything else. And suddenly Tim and I would sort of come to our senses, and it'd be Sunday morning, and we'd been playing Dungeons and Dragons all weekend long. And we got so lost in the game that we forgot that the weekend was gone. If you've ever had that experience, you've experienced what is known as flow, which is a highly focused, altered state of consciousness when awareness of self and time diminishes due to being completely engrossed in an enjoyable activity. Flow is typically viewed as a desirable state of consciousness, and sports psychologists help athletes get into a sense of flow, because when you're not thinking about yourself, when you're not thinking about other things, you are able to devote all of your attention to the task that you're doing. And you play tennis better, you play baseball better, you play golf better, your painting becomes better. When you're thinking about yourself, when you're thinking about the crowd, when you're thinking about how embarrassing it would be to fail, you inevitably do not perform as well because your attention is being taken away from the task at hand. Now, flow. When does flow happen? Well, it typically happens in people who are good at something when they are really, really being challenged. If you're good at something, let's say you're playing tennis against somebody who really sucks and you're really good, you're not going to experience flow because this person is boring. I'm killing this person. So you'll start thinking about your taxes or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or what you have to do later today. But if you're a great tennis player and you're playing somebody else in a highly competitive tennis match, man, you get in the zone and you forget about everything else because your abilities are high and the challenge is high. Now, where do we see applications of flow? Well, if you read about Montessori education, the idea is to give people the opportunity to choose what they find most interesting and most challenging. In Montessori education, the teacher doesn't decide what is going to be learned. The student chooses what they want to learn and what they can learn. And so the child is able to get themselves into situations where they can do something good and they are challenged. And so that's why people think Montessori education is so good. It allows you to really focus on the learning and not worry about whether or not if this is too boring or whether or not this is too hard. You get to choose. If you've ever been in sports psychology, in a sports event, sports psychologists try to help athletes get, quote, in the zone. And that's when you're not thinking about the crowd or thinking about failure, but you're thinking about doing your task and being the best at it. And sometimes if you've ever seen a bunch of groovy musicians who are sort of focusing together and really jamming, one of them will say, hey, man, we were really in the pocket on that zone, right? So as you walk around today, I want you to think about what kinds of things are you not aware of? What's really capturing your attention? And what happens when you're not focused? Are you thinking about bad things in your life? Can you learn how to train your attention to really focus and help you be more productive? So it's 9:55. It's 9:51. We are about out of time. I want to thank you for coming today, and I do want to invite you to come to tonight's webinar in Teams at 7 p.m. I'm going to show you a couple of videos of some really crazy brain-related behavioral disorders that are going to challenge your beliefs and what it means to be aware of your reality. All right, exam is this weekend, and the exam review will be from 8:30 to 9:15 on Friday morning in YouTube's. If y'all don't have any questions, have a great day, and I will see you later tonight. Take care.